It's stage 13 of Giro d'Italia 2013, and 7 riders are out front of the peloton. Maximum advantage of 13 minutes. Now it's down to 2 3/4 minutes or so. And these 7 riders have been reeled in, not entirely by the peloton, but to a large extent. They took a long time to get going, but the peloton have really lit the afterburners in the last sort of 15-20 kilometers or more. And as a result, this break is now down to a manageable distance, and it looks as if the peloton have stalled a little bit. Scarponi and co. enjoying the sunshine of what has been a pretty demanding Giro, especially in terms of weather. Things have stalled considerably. Vincenzo Nibali is also enjoying the little bit of chat out there on the road. Lots of smiles, and this will be great relief to guys at the back of the group, because they split into several echelons as they chase down this gap, and plenty of riders who are really feeling the distance now were shelled out the back in groups. They'll all be able to get back in at this point. So the big talking point, Bradley Wiggins, his departure, and indeed rider Hejeda. Let's deal with Bradley Wiggins' departure, because he was further up in general classification than Hejeda and going better. And of course the reigning Tour de France champion had targeted Giro d'Italia 2013 as his major goal, and Sean, just didn't work out for him. And I mean, it's got to be the right decision for his health to withdraw him from the race.
Yes, I think when you consider the health situation, I think, you know, it's the way to do it. He wasn't going to really get better with the conditions as well. We've had the last couple of days. I think it has had more effect on him. Instead of getting out of the cold and the chest infection he's been carrying, it's getting worse. And we could see that, you know, the performances were, you know, really going down. Yesterday he was suffering on the flat section, and that's not Bradley Wiggins. He had difficulty, you know, following there on the in the final 25-30 kilometres, and that tells like the sickness is just taking its toll. And I'm not surprised at all that he did not continue on.
So now he'll have time to get himself rested and to fix that issue and get back to full fitness. But what now for his season? It was all about the Giro d'Italia. Does he just park 2013 and put it down to experience? Are there goals left? And there's a little one in July that might be of interest to him.
Well, I think it's going to change. This it's going to change the season for him. The Giro was, the big event for him of the season, and now that's not worked out. So the Tour of France will definitely have to be looked at, and it's going to make it, you know, interesting again within Sky, because, you know, we've heard the talk with Christopher Froome, Bradley Wiggins for the Tour of France in just the weeks leading up to the start of this Giro. Now they're back in a situation. Will Bradley want to, you know, perform in the Tour of France again for the general manager Dave Brailsford? You know, it's not going to be maybe an easier situation. If, for example, the Giro had went real well, Bradley Wiggins win the Giro, well then I would see it as being simpler. But now it's going to be interesting what way Sky will work for the Tour de France in July.
If the reigning Tour de France champion decides that he wants to ride the Tour de France, then it'd be very difficult to leave him at home.
Well, I don't think there should be any doubt about him taking part in the Tour of France. The defending champion, but again, we'll have to wait, I suppose, and see as time goes by and gets near to the Tour of France. Will it stay the same as it has been over the last week or 2 weeks, let's say, where Chris Froome is going to be the leader for the Tour of France now, but not working out in Italy in the Giro for Bradley Wiggins? Will things change a little bit within Sky?
It does give them an extra tactical opportunity, and things can happen in races. So, you know, you put all your eggs in the Chris Froome basket, it could wreak havoc. We saw a couple of years ago in the Tour de France, of course, Bradley Wiggins came into it with great form, was going well early on, but broke his collarbone the first week, and that was the end of that.
Yes, and that's always a big risk in the Tour of France. The first weeks are so hectic. Everybody is nervous. Everybody's feeling good, and there's a lot of riders want to stay in the front in the earlier days, but there's only space for so many riders in the peloton in the top 30. But when you have, three times, 4 times that number wanting to be up there, well, that equals crashes, and we've always seen it in the earlier years. And of course, this year starting in Corsica is not going to make it any simpler, because I think the roads there, the road furniture, as we say, a lot of that in Corsica, so that will make the race a bit more dangerous, I think. And talking to some of the riders as well that has been there and looked at the course. So it's always good to have 2 riders in a team capable of winning the Tour of France. It's a great, it's a great deck of cards to have. So, when it comes down to the time, who is the real leader when you get into the first time trial, the mountain stages, then you have to make a decision like who is going to be the protected man. That's going to be an interesting one.
We're back to Hino Le Mans 1985, perhaps.
Well, perhaps it's not something that's never happened before. That's certain. We had it with Le Mans Hino, and we had it a number of times with other riders and teams. In the Giro with Roach Vincentini on the year that he won the Giro. So it's something we've experienced in the past.
Plenty of experience. There's the Maglia Rosa group. The gap has extended somewhat. Almost a minute extra have been gained by the 7 riders out front, as the peloton decided that little bout of activity had worked the oracle for them. Thomas Dekker no longer working for rider Hejeda. He's kept him company for much of the first week and a bit. And now they have different ambitions in the Garmin Sharp squad. Thomas Danielson is the best placed of them, 40th overall. So it's not about overall, it's about stage wins for the Garmin Sharp squad. Let's name check the guys up front. Pablo Lastras of Movistar, Jaro Armetti of Androni Giocattoli, Lars Bach of Lotto Belisol, Danilo Honda Radio Shack, Nicola Bohm of Bardiani Valvole, Rafael Andriato of Vini Fantini, and Tobias Ludvigsson of Argus Shimano. Now with 3 minutes and 43 seconds advantage. The best placed of them is Danilo Honda. He's 97th overall at 1 hour 22 minutes and 16 seconds in arrears from Vincenzo Nibali, so no question but that they are not a threat. Some of your comments on Twitter, lots of questions about now. How do Sky play it tactically with the withdrawal of Bradley Wiggins? Already they had diverted their attention in a large measure to Rigoberto Urán. They don't have an extra car to play now with Wiggins, but it's all about Urán now, so that's good news for him.
Yes, well, it's certainly good news for him because he's in really good position. When you look at what's left to do in this Giro, the mountaintop finishes, there's a number of them out there, and he is the real specialist in that, and he's got the team around him, so he will be, really by Sky now, he'll be the one who will be the protected rider, and it will be interesting to see exactly what he can do, because he's in a real good position in the general classification, just over 2 minutes down, and when you look at the train to come, lots of opportunities there for a rider like Rigoberto Urán.
Jen Lovesey says, Twitter handle is @DQ Sport, by the way. Jen Lovesey says, put them both in the Tour of Switzerland, the winner should be the leader, end of. I'm not sure that will work. Yeah. They'd both be flying for Tour of Switzerland and then struggling by the second week of the Tour.
Well, of course, you cannot change. Christopher Froome's programme is, planned with many, many months, and he is doing the Dauphiné, of course. So that's, the next objective for him. So you can't just change, a rider's programme because one of the other riders had to change their programme. So it's going to be, a matter now exactly what will Bradley Wiggins do, and that's the interesting one. From here, he has to try and get over the sickness, recover health-wise fully, and then see what he will do before the Tour of France, because it's possible that we will see him doing some event before the Tour of France. Tour of Switzerland, of course, is a one which position-wise it probably wouldn't suit him.
Lucas Quinto in the Vini Fantini car, chatting to the commissar there. All very relaxed up front, although these riders are working well together. Vini Fantini represented by Rafael Andriato, young Brazilian, 25 years of age. Second year with the Fantini squad. He won the Jurmala Grand Prix in Latvia in 2012. And the Châteauroux Classic, and this an altogether bigger stage. Peloton lined out. So obviously a little bit of activity up there, and it's Mark Cavendish's team, Omega Pharma Quickstep, that have taken up the pace. Is that what you expected to see?
I see they were working there with Ulrika Greenedge. Are they really on the front, or there's somebody else ahead of the Omega Pharma Quick Step riders, as we see there? We'll have to get a shot on the front end of the peloton again, but they are going to contribute a bit. But I'd be surprised if they put the team in the front. And we've seen there, just as we came on air, there was a lot of riders up front from different teams, and I'm not surprised, because we did hear from Mark Cavendish yesterday. Well, the team was left to do all the work, and they did a fabulous job, and they certainly really worked well yesterday, and everything was perfect for the lead and for the sprint from Mark Cavendish. But are they on the front? No, there's other riders. Or yes, there's Ulrika Greenedge there also on the front. So yes, they have other teams decided they want to chase this one down.
Ulrika Greenedge, of course, of Matthew Harley-Goss for the sprints, although he didn't manage to make it into the final shake-up yesterday. Lancaster doing the business for them in 5th position. As the riders out front, looks like just a tour through the Italian countryside for them, but they were picked up on that speed check a little earlier at 55 kilometers an hour. So very impressive progress being made by these 7 riders. Giro Ermetti of Androni Giocattoli, and he gives way to Lotto Bellasol's Lars Bach. Maglia Rosa group of Vincenzo Nibali, and that hulking, also familiar style of Oscar Gatto, crouching. So the riders working their way forward. Bradley Wiggins, the obvious tactic, or the obvious discussion rider. Hejadal, well, that one's been coming for a few days as well. He's just wasn't getting better, and he decided, well, that's enough. Not exactly sure what's wrong with him. Unfortunately, they've racked their brains. They think it might be some sort of this illness. This is going around the peloton, but he doesn't have anything like the same symptoms, or perhaps it could be an attack of allergies. But again, symptoms are not clearly defined. Rigoberto Urán picked up by the cameras. He's now the number 1, the undisputed number 1 in the Sky Pro Cycling squad, 3rd overall, 2 minutes and 4 seconds back. And of course, plenty of people have pointed out that he lost over a minute waiting for Bradley Wiggins in the first few days, when Wiggins was struggling on the descents. But of course, that was then, and if we all knew now, or if we all knew then what we know now, then well, we'd all be lotto millionaires for a start. The bunch arrive, and they're going round about the same pace. 3 minutes and 37 seconds the gap to the 7 riders out front. Welcome back. It's stage 13 of the Giro d'Italia 2013. Busseto to Cherasco, 254 kilometers. It's the longest stage of the race. Mostly flat for the riders. Lots of lumps and bumps, though, in the end game. That could catch out some of the sprinters. The riders are racing from Emilia-Romagna through Lombardy to Piedmont today, in the northwestern corner of Italy. They're just south of the mountains and just above the coast. That's Danilo Hondo up front in the breakaway. 7 riders out front have established an advantage of over 3.5 minutes. Was at one stage 13 minutes, and those riders are hanging on out there within chasing distance of the bunch. These 7 riders working well together as they race towards the finish in Cherasco. And racing in Piedmont. Briefly they touch Lombardy, but it's all about Piedmont, which of course is serious cycling country. Plenty of the great superstars of cycling have come from this region. Costante Girardegno, of course, won 2 Giro d'Italia. 6 Milan-San Remos, 3 Tours of Lombardy. He was also Italian road race champion on 9 occasions. He's born in Novi Ligure, not too far from here. And of course we've already been through Tortona, which is well known as the final resting place of Fausto Coppi, or the place where he died in 1960. Such a tragically early death for the great Campionissimo. Fausto Coppi, 5 times the winner of the Giro d'Italia, twice a winner of the Tour de France, and the undisputed superstar of 1940s and 50s Italian and world cycling. He was born in nearby Castellana in 1919 and died in hospital at Tortona in 1960 as a result of the complications of an illness picked up on a hunting and cycling trip to Burkina Faso. It's accepted at this stage that he died of malaria, although at the time the hospital and the doctors refused to listen to the entreaties from Raphael Gimignani, the French rider who also contracted the same illness, and he was treated in a French hospital with quinine and whatever else they used to do back then, and he made a full recovery. Unfortunately for Fausto Coppi, they just weren't able to bring him back, and he died young, adding perhaps to the legend and the mystique around the great man. In fact, I would recommend anyone interested in finding out about the life of Fausto Coppi, or indeed the history of 1940s and 50s Italian cycling, and indeed it's a pretty good social commentary on Italy at the time as well, a country that was going through massive change. And Fausto Coppi was leading them along with some of the situations that he got into in his private life, very much to the fore. And Coppi, well, that book, yeah, I would recommend William Fotheringham's Fallen Angels. Absolutely cracking read. Not just, well, the whole story is brilliant, but the first couple of chapters are absolutely epic. 3:20 now. They've paired it back, those 7 riders out front. Pablo Lastras of Movistar, and you see on your screen there for a moment ago, Giro Ermetti of Androni. Argus Shimano's Tobias Ludvigsson is up there, the big Swedish rider who's been on the attack so far in this race. Rafael Andreato of Vini Fantini, the Brazilian. Nicola Bohem of Bardiani Valvole. Danilo Hondo of Radio Shack. Lars Bach is in there for Lotto Belisol. These 7 riders working well together. And needless to say, so much of the chat on Twitter at DQ Sport is the handle. It's all about, look at the way the peloton is lined out at the moment. They are chasing. This is not an easy day. It's the longest day of the race, and look at that crack appears, and somebody needs to flick the elbow pretty quick. And the legs are stinging now. 13 days in, Sean, and some riders are really going to be feeling this.
Yes, well, the riders that are suffering in the last number of days, and you can see there yesterday again there was riders that lost quite a lot of time, and coming in groups. We did see that group of Bradley Wiggins, and there were some riders much further down as well. There was actually the last 4 riders in the stage were from the Colombia team yesterday, all Colombian riders, and there was there was 2 of them came in a long ways down. One of them at 12 minutes and the other one at 14 minutes. So that tells you they're suffered majorly, and there's a lot of other riders as well who are starting to feel the racing, the conditions, it's all building up and it's starting to hurt, and you can see the line out there, and it's amazing the way the bunch is just going. They seem to up the pace suddenly. They did slow down there for a moment. We see Scarponi and some of the riders, Nibali, they were having a chat, so it did knock off on pace wise, but it is after going back up again, and the riders on the rear just in one line there, and there's a lot of them suffering big time at the moment.
Suffering indeed. From Katusha, Luca Paolini, 5 days in the Maglia Rosa. Now he is just suffering in the big long line along with so many other riders. Taylor Phinney, we saw a lot of him in action as the
a lot of wind out there. You can see the way the trees are blowing. Is it from the riders just going by at a fast rate? But it looks more than that. You can see the branches are blowing quite a lot. It looks like it being a tailwind at the moment, and that is something where, you know, the peloton, if they start to ride on front, they can go at such a fast rate. If you have a headwind and you're sitting back in the group, well, then it's a lovely situation to be in, because you get, you know, real good drafting and you can follow much easier. But when you get a tailwind, well, then the guys up front can go so fast, and you don't get much advantage sitting the wheel, and that's where if you're suffering from fatigue, you're going to suffer major. And as we can see, there is a lot of riders there in difficulty.
Group up front continue to slog away. Mark Cavendish is in the peloton, safely ensconced. Someone's asked about his specialised Venga and how come he's not on his usual one. Well, he's got a special design today. He worked with the specialised people to come up with the colours, and it's quite an understated one. It's nice, and as if by magic it appears in front of us. Mark Cavendish in the red points jersey, leaders of the points competition. 3 stage wins under his belt, 39 wins in Grand Tour classification races, which is amazing. An amazing statistic for a man so young, just 27 years of age. He is level with Delio Rodriguez of Spain and Learco Guerra on 39 Grand Tour stage wins. He's amassed 13 wins in Giro d'Italia, 23 wins in the Tour de France, and 3 stage wins in Vuelta España. The list, of course, is topped out by Eddie Merckx, 64 stage wins, 24 Giro, 34 Tour, and 6 Vuelta. Mario Cipollini on 57, Pataki 48, Binda 43, Bernardino 41. So he's within touching distance of the Grand Tour stage record of the great Bernardino. Lastras seems to be enjoying things. Throttles back to wait for the rest of the group. And as they go over this drag with 78 kilometers to go, clearly Pablo Lastras has good legs today. And he just jogs ahead, and the others don't let him know that he's managed to open a gap, so he has to have a little bit of a think about that. He has to come back and think about what you've done. Yeah, that's not good enough.
Yes, we could see Lard's back. He just gave a look at him there, and you know, did not even try to follow. And at this point, you know, they have just to see what's going to happen back in the bunch. They're being made aware that the bunch is very active behind, and I think, you know, they're just trying to, for the moment, decide what they're going to do, because they're not pushing on here at any big rate. They're just you know, rolling it along, and they're going to see if the peloton will close them down, or will they just leave them hang out there, and they're undecided exactly what to do for the moment.
Yes, it's an interesting cat and mouse thing that happens between the breakaway, because they're aware that the peloton has just much greater firepower, so they try and maintain a gap that is just good enough for them to push on. They try and save some energy for the final push a little bit later in the stage. Talking a little bit about the end of the stage, there is 1 classified hill on this stage and 2 intermediate sprints. The 1 classified hill is a category 3 climb of Trecune, 714 meters, and it ramps up for around about 10 kilometers, and the top of it comes with 36.8 kilometers to go, so it's a decent distance from the finish when they come to that. But that would have taken the sting out of their legs a little bit, and there are a couple of other unclassified ramps between there and the finish. One of them comes about 7 kilometers from the line that could well draw it out of the sprinters. So it's going to be a challenge for the likes of Mark Cavendish and co to get over these lumps and bumps if they're going to make it to the finish in Cherasco.
Yes, and I think that was the reason we see the breakaway getting that 13 minutes maximum advantage. I think there was a lot of you know, undecided teams back in the peloton. Will Quickstep, Omega Quickstep chased again today, and you know, they were not going to do all the pulling on the front of the bunch after what they had to do yesterday. And I think they were all waiting, and you know, often is the case. And then, you know, a number of teams decide to get together in the front, 2 men from each team, and then that's what we're seeing here at the moment.
It's beautiful sunshine at the moment. The weather forecast is the potential for rain at the end of today's stage, but no sign of that at the moment. What a great race that Betancourt has had so far. Carlos Betancourt, one of two AG Tour Le Mondial riders who are to the fore. Betancourt 14th overall. His team leader, you might say, is Domenico Pozzovivo, 9th overall, 4 minutes and 17 seconds back. Betancourt 5 minutes and 26 seconds, and with 2 second places on stages, he'll be looking forward to tomorrow and Sunday in the Alps for an opportunity to go one better. AG Tour Le Mondial have been in the news in the last few days, of course, as a result of that positive dope test for Sylvain Georges. He says it was an over-the-counter medicine that he took. He's put the hand up and said, I'm sorry, it was a lack of concentration. I made a mistake. He inadvertently took heptaminol, he says. Well, at least that's what he tested positive for. Still waiting for the B sample results to come as the peloton comes to a halt. But as a result of that, that's the second positive for the team within the last year. And AG Tour are signed up to the movement for clean cycling, which is an assembly of teams with a voluntary charter, kicked off by the French squads. And Vincent Lavenu of the AG Tour squad says that they will adhere to the articles of that charter, and they will take 8 days of voluntary suspension from the World Tour following this event. And that means that they will miss Dauphiné Libéré, possibly also Tour of Switzerland. And that's a massive blow to the team. And it's interesting because that would be contrary to the UCI regulations, so it remains to be seen what the UCI will think about that. It seems to be something that Lavenu and co are doing for the right reasons, but it is technically contrary, and they could well get a decent fine. And of course, the Dauphiné Libéré is very important to the team's activities. They have sponsors from down that neck of the woods in France. Well, that's a big race for them. So it's a big blow to them, and massive disappointment. And Sylvain Georges has put the hands up and said, "Well, I'm sorry." Could cost his team dear. Still, though, that charter says that they can stay in this race, and they do have 2 riders well up in overall classification, so still an opportunity for them to come up with a good result for their season. Pozzovivo, Sean, for the Alpine stages, who are you looking at to really move on? Pozzovivo's been very active, so too Betancourt.
Yes, well, I think they have 2 good riders there for what's to come in this Giro, and they're going to try and play both them cards. And when you look at the general classification, they're in a really good position to move up in the general classification, because the mountaintop finishes, they should be able to pull a bit of time out of some of the other riders who are ahead of them in that classement. And it will be interesting to see how good they are into the 3rd week, and that is always the question. The good climbers, Pozzovivo, we've seen in the Tour of Trentino there, he was riding so well last year or the year before. I think it was 2 years ago actually, and he was so impressive. But then when he came to the Tour of Italy, he wasn't able to put any sort of performance in like he was doing there in the 3rd week of a race, and that's something riders have difficulty doing that. But with what's been over in this race and the long time trial, they're in a perfect position to get a very good place in the general classification. They have to be careful today as well. We can see there, things are very nervous back in the bunch here. It's windy conditions a bit more than we've had for a number of days, and that's where you have to be careful that there are not some splits in the group here in the peloton, because that would be a disaster for them to lose time here any time at all. And the other big favourites, they cannot do that today, so they have to be careful. We see Betancourt hanging about in the very rear there. At the moment, you can get away with that, but when you get into this final 50 kilometres, you have to stay really close to the front. With the way the teams are riding up front, it's a bit of a day where you could get a little moment of sidewind, and then there could be splits in the peloton, and that's where you could lose valuable seconds.
That could easily happen right now, because they're absolutely drilling it up front. Amiga Pharma Quick Step, a little bit of help from Orica Green Edge. and they're setting a ferocious pace, and no riders sticking themselves their heads out of the wind to come up the line with bottles, although a couple of riders are heading back, but that will be a little bit of an ask for them to make their way back. A little adjustment to the ratchet on his shoe for Mark Cavendish. Can he make it 4 stage wins from this race? Can he get over those final lumps and bumps? Clearly he's motivated, clearly his team believe that he can. It's interesting that they're riding so hard behind Sean, because, well, if they mop up this break early before the hills, could they leave themselves vulnerable to other attacks?
Yes, and that's not what they will want to do in the peloton. And we can see that it's coming down and then it's growing out again, because at 97 kilometres it was down to 2:47, and then a bit further at about 82 kilometres went up to just under 3.5 minutes, and now at 72 kilometres back down to 2:38. So it's moving a lot, and it's just that the way they're pushing on the front of the peloton, you can see that back in the peloton, they're just putting up the pace very fast for a moment, and it's causing a lot of problems further back in the main peloton. Just one line of riders, and then they will slow it down again. I think they will definitely slow it down here as they get a bit too close, and they don't want to close down this 7-man group at this point, certainly not.
Ageless Venomous on Twitter wants to know, Sean, how does recovery differ after each race as the tour goes on, or do riders keep the same routine?
Well, everybody keeps the same routine. That's a guarantee. And rest, get as much rest as possible. And when you're in a stage race, you try and get to the hotel as quickly as possible from the time you finish the race, and have your shower. If you're not travelling a distance, and if you are, then you go to your bus and they have their shower in the bus and they move on to the hotel. But if you're in the town, the hotel where you finish the race, well, then you just go by bike, a lot of the riders, and have your shower and just rest up and get something to eat. And that's something, the race leader and the riders have to go to the podium, they have to go to the press reception, press conference, and that takes a lot of time. So they could arrive an hour and a half behind the other riders of the team. And the race leader, if you're leader from very early in the race, the stress of being race leader, the journalists, the TV, all of that, but also you have to do all this podium stuff after the finish, and it all adds up. Every day you lose that hour and a half of recovery time, and it can catch up at the end of a 3-week race.
Intermediate sprint point coming, and it's Andreato showing the most interest. Andreato from Bohème across the line. Ondo watches and manages 3rd position, so it's a few extra euro added to the coffers of the squad of Andreato, Bardiani as well, that team, and Radio Shack as they continue to drill it on the front. 2 minutes and 30 seconds now. And that's coming down with every few meters.
I think the intermediate sprints, the prize money for the places, they're going to contest that a bit more, because they're going to be making the calculation out front. Well, we're not really going to be left to have a go for stage victory, and so then they just get a bit more interested in the intermediate sprint points, which is 500 to win, 5, 3 and 1 I think it is. So the next one as well, which is a bit further down the road at 52 kilometres to finish. Will they be left out? I reckon they should be, but they realise the stage victory is not going to be for the taking here today. They're not going to be allowed to go all that way. They just get a bit more interested in the intermediate sprints.
Yeah, and perhaps Mega Pharma Quickstep drilling in on the front are a little anxious to try and keep that break very close indeed, because it was a pretty close run thing yesterday, wasn't it? I mean, I remember thinking with 5 kilometres to go, well, it's no problem at all. They've definitely closed them down. But it took to the last 500 metres. It really was a tough day out for them, and Mark Cavendish was quick to pay tribute to them afterwards.
Yes, and I think the wet conditions, it did really affect everybody yesterday. We could see that in the end. Omega Pharma Quickstep, however, after doing a lot of work during the day, and just that final bit to close it down, it was difficult. But up front as well, the breakaway, they really put in a big run the last number of kilometres, and so close, but just in the final 500-600 metres too much for them.
The umbrellas are coming up at the finish line in Cherasco. It's one of the scattered showers that they promised us today, but well, hopefully it will have cleared by the time the riders make it through to the finish, because well, they deserve some riding in decent conditions throughout the day. So 2:23 is the advantage for the 7 riders up front ahead of the main peloton, led by Amiga Pharma Quick-Step. They're pushing hard to close them down. See how they get on after these. You're very welcome back to stage 13 of Giro d'Italia 2013. Christian Canese of the Sky team is safely ensconced in the group of the Maglia Rosa Vincenzo Nibali. Canese is working exclusively for Rigoberto Urán now since the departure of Bradley Wiggins this morning. He withdrew as a result of the chest infection that he's been battling for the last few days, and it was decided in consultation with the team's doctor that for the good of his health he would withdraw from the race and try and recover to race another day. Amiga Pharma Quick-Step on the front and aided by Orica Greenedge, with the objective of closing down the gap to this group of 7 riders up front now, 2:11 in front. So the 7 riders up front are Pablo Lastras of the Movistar squad, Giaro Armetti of Androni Giocattoli, Lars Bach of Lotto Belisol, Danilo Honda of Radio Shack, Nicola Boehm of Bardiani Valvole, Rafael Andriato of Vini Fantini, which you see on screen there. The yellow colours. Tobias Ludvigsen of Argus Shimano is the 7th member of this group that had established over 13 minutes advantage. That's now been whittled down by a very animated and very aggressive bunch, as we see Mountains classification leader Pirazzi towards the back, as he was for much of yesterday in the rain and in the sunshine. There is a little bit of rain at the finish line at the moment, but signs of blue clouds in the sky, so I think there's every chance that they could have dry roads by the time the peloton make it. Still 66 kilometers away, and they have a classified climb starting with around about 46 kilometers to go, the 3rd category ascent of Tre Cune. I mentioned Pirazzi. He has a handy 20-point advantage over Jackson Rodriguez of the Androni Giocattoli squad. And Pirazzi, it'll be interesting to see whether he's able to score any points in tomorrow's first visit to the Alps. Sestriere, 2 climbs tomorrow, Sestriere and Bardinecchia. Sestriere is a long slog. It's rated a 2nd category assault. Bardinecchia, though, is shorter and sharper. That's going to be a serious rendezvous for the general classification contenders as well, of course. Now we survey the scene over the vineyards of Langhe. The utterly sumptuous and gorgeous Barolo wines produced in this region. Sort of wines that light up everyone's eyes when they see them and dim them a little bit later in the evening. And he's enjoying the scene. It's Amiga Pharma Quick-Step that are doing the donkey work up front.
Yes, and we see the Amiga Pharma rider there, Jens Morris, who was doing a lot of pulling on the front there for the last number of kilometres. When we get front of the peloton, he seems to be the one who's there all the time, so they're contributing a lot today, and I'm not surprised, because they want to try and have a go for the stage victory. You know, they've had some good places with Matty Goss, but haven't been successful as yet. But today they taking control of things and keeping this breakaway under control.
David Miller, who's in there for Garmin Sharp, has been saying that he's been in 22 Grand Tours, but he's never seen such consistently long transfers. Will that be affecting them more than usual, do you think?
Well, the transfers, again, as we mentioned just some time ago, recovery is so important, and the transfers are always, tiring, because you have to get in the bus or get by the team car, and you're not to your hotel for a number of hours after the finish, where if you can be close to the finish, your hotel, well, then you get there quickly, and there's that extra time to recover, and that is important. And I think Miller is getting, to the end of his career, and when you start suffering a bit more in the races, well, then you feel those transfers as well. And when you're really going well, you don't worry too much about them. But when the legs are hurting and the morale is low, weather, horrible conditions, everything, you start to pick out every little thing that's causing less, I suppose, recovery time, and making the race more difficult when you're getting a difficult time.
Of course, the geography of Italy makes it that much more difficult to avoid the long transfers, because they feel the responsibility to get down into the south of Italy as much as possible, and then it's a long slog up to the north, which might be the heartland of Italian cycling, and of course to get to the Dolomites and the Alps for those big meeting points for the general classification contenders. As the riders head through the feed zone. Gap now under 2 minutes to the 7 riders up front. What about rider Hejidal for Tour de France? That's been mooted as well, as he let's hope he can make a swift recovery, and he would certainly add to the firepower for the Garmin team for Tour de France, wouldn't he?
Yes, well, if he goes away now and recovers well, and start thinking about the Tour de France, get ready for the Tour de France, I think he's capable of doing a good performance. He's proven in the 3-week tour he can win them, so it's a matter of just getting healthy again, and with going home at this point, I think he's not going to suffer from really going deep in the Tour of Italy, so Tour of France is quite possible. We could see him in really good shape.
Could Sky and Wiggins go for the Vuelta with Richie Porte, asks Spike Pitt. Bad news for Richie Porte. He's had a pretty good season so far already, with victory in Paris-Nice, second in Criterium International, but that's his big target for the season, and he's been told by the team. And it is a hell of a management job, isn't it, for Dave Brailsford, that he's such fantastic riders. Rigoberto Urán and Richie Porte, they're, super domestiques that definitely have Grand Tour potential themselves, and he has to keep them managed so that they are able to satisfy their own ambitions, and also ride in the service of team leaders like Chris Froome.
Yes, and that discussion was going about during the Paris-Nice, when Richie Porte was so impressive and won that, showing real good form, and leadership as well. And the question then about the Tour of France, and he did say, well, I'm at the services of the other riders in the Tour of France, and the Vuelta was mentioned at the end of the year for Richie Porte, so he will be hoping that he gets the support of a team and try for a 3-week tour, and it'll be interesting to see, because he's just coming there every year, and this year he has an exceptional year, and it'll be great to see him getting the support of the team for the Vuelta, and see how he can perform in that in a 3-week as the leader of a team. We know he can perform as a helper, because last year he was absolutely, real good performance in the Tour of France. But when you're a leader, sometimes it changes a bit over a 3-week race. But he's seem to be able to manage the 3-week distance.
It's tough to keep a team together, isn't it? All those superstars, to keep them year on year. Richie Porte signed an extension to his contract with Sky Pro Cycling just within the last couple of weeks.
Yes, well, when you have a team like Team Sky, you have so many great riders. You have already proven riders like Bradley Wiggins winning the Tour of France. You have Chris Froome, who was so good last year on the Tour, and one of the big favourite for the Tour de France this year. And then you have Richie Porte, who was coming there in the last couple of years and looking like he could be a rider for a 3-week tour as well. And of course, when you're that rider as in Porte's position, well, then you're looking forward to the end of the year and have the support in the Vuelta. But when things start change with the other leaders, I'm sure he's a little bit concerned as well now, because the programme might change a bit more than change than what it was in the beginning of the season.
Just inside 2 minutes. Omega Pharma Quick Step and Orica Green Edge have taken responsibility for controlling the pace today on the front of the peloton. 7 riders out front: Lastras, Armetti, Bach, Hondo, Bohem, Andriato and Ludvigsen, as the riders make their way through the vineyards of Piedmont towards Cherasco in the northwestern corner of Italy. Riders out front heading for the hills. You're very welcome back to stage 13 of the Giro d'Italia 2013. Vincenzo Nibali leads the race overall by 41 seconds from Cadel Evans. Rigoberto Urán is the sole representative of the Sky Pro Cycling squad in the top 10 overall at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. 7 riders out front at the moment, and their advantage has been whittled down. At one stage it was up over 13 minutes. Now it's just under 2 minutes. Here's the overall young rider standings. Superb performance by Rafael Maika. He's got that 1 minute and 5 second advantage over Carlos Betancourt. Betancourt will look to close that advantage in the next couple of days in the Alps. Maika, of course, has moved into the top 10 overall in recent days. Wilco Kelderman is hanging on grimly. Suffered in the last tough mountain stage, but he's still there or thereabouts. So the mountains classification leader, Stefano Pirazzi of the Bardiani squad, is still lurking towards the rear of the peloton. You see him in that blue jersey there, just to the right of his teammate in the green Bardiani gear. And Pirazzi likes to kind of hang around at the back if he's not jumping off the front. And we could see him a little bit animated and exercised in about 15 or so kilometers time, because that's when the hill starts, the one classified climb of Tre Cune, but that of course will only happen if they manage to close down the riders up front. Every chance they might do it. Give them a roll call. Lastras, Armetti, Bach, Hondo, Bohem, Andriato and Ludvigsen have been out there for quite a long time, and plenty of old campaigners in there. 4 of the 7 are over 30 years of age. The most venerable is Danilo Hondo of Radio Shack. As we look at the point standings, Mark Cavendish has now edged 10 points ahead of Cadel Evans and Elia Viviani. Actually, let's talk about the points, because has Mark Cavendish got a chance? That's the question, Sean. 10 points ahead of Cadel Evans, but it's coming into Evans country in the next couple of days. Needs a stage win here, doesn't he?
Yes, well, he needs to get maximum points today, and then it's a little bit out of his control from there on for a number of days. And Cadel Evans is definitely going for it. We've seen the way he's been contesting the sprints on occasions when there's a number of points available for the points classification, and the uphill sprints he has been very active. So but Cavendish have come back with his stage wins of recent, and yesterday's one again today. If he takes maximum points, well, then he will take a nice advantage, but it's far from over. I think Cadel Evans the next number of days he will mark up points normally, but again, if there's big breakaways go away and they're allowed to go on, well, then we could see some of the breakaway riders taking maximum points. So it's all to play for. Certainly for Cadel Evans, he's in there with a good shout, because when you look at the terrain has to come in this Giro in the final week.
Yeah, he's got the final stage, of course, in Brescia. Would look to be a cast iron opportunity for Mark Cavendish. But whether there are other opportunities, Sky Pro Cycling have hung on to the lead in the team's overall standings, but it's now been pared back by about 3 minutes as a result of yesterday's results, and the Blanco team now within 2 minutes and 22 seconds. That's not the major consideration for Sky Pro Cycling, or indeed for Blanco or Lampre, etc. It's all about getting their rider into the Maglia Rosa, and all of those teams have a representative in the top 6. Sky Pro Cycling also leading on points in the team classification from BMC and Movistar. Seven riders still riding out front: Lastras, Ermetti, Bach, Hondo, Bohem, Andriato and Ludvigsen. Was that a newly married couple who've interrupted the nuptials to cheer on the riders in the Giro? It looked a bit like it. Katusha's squad. Is it a bike change?
Yes.
Yes, Trofimov. It's their best placed rider overall. 16th at 6 minutes and 8 seconds. Yuri Trofimov. Relatively trouble-free. And he's got a couple of teammates there. Maxim Belkov, who was in the break yesterday. He's already got a stage win in this year's Giro, and now he's in Gregario duty. And, well, it was done so quickly and so seamlessly that barely dropped off the back of the peloton. That's how it could be done, should be done.
And we also see the rider from Blanco Pro Cycling Team, Jack Broadbridge there. He's a little bit off the rear as well. He seemed to be hanging around there on the rear, so he seemed to be suffering from that crash earlier on.
Yeah, seemed to be favouring his wrist as he got back on the bike after that crash early in the stage. Andriato is feeling the effects of being out there. He's just giving his thighs a little bit of a slap and a little bit of a shake to try and breathe some life back into them. There's the 7 riders up front: Lastros, Ermetti, Bach, Hondo, Bohem, Andriato and Ludvigsen. And we've got 3 different Giro stage winners in here. Pablo Lastras took stage win in the Giro in 2001. And he shares that honour indeed with Danilo Honda, who won 2 stages of the 2001 Giro. And of course, Lars Bach took a career-defining win for himself in last year's Giro d'Italia. 3 stage winners. Danilo Honda, the 2nd oldest man in the race this year. He's just about 100 days or so younger than Stefano Garzelli. Now well over 39 years of age, and at that age you don't really count the days too much.
And he probably sees teammate winning in California, Jens, so he probably said, yes, I have to get into the break, I can win a one also.
Crash in the middle of the peloton, problems for Saxo Tinkoff. Looked like might be a Colombian rider down, at least one Colombian rider, a couple of them, well, there's a couple of them waiting.
3 of them.
Not sure how many went down in that. Little spill as the riders come through these little technical hairpins. Little squeeze in the group. And down they go. The Colombian team have been in the wars a little bit. They've lost a couple of riders. Ospina Navarra. Atapuma, of course, is their main GC rider. He's 25th overall. And Avila it is who is tailed off a little bit at the moment. Chalabut, of course, we've seen as well up in the mountains classification. He's still in there. They've lost Ospina Navarra and Quintero in the last few days. Down to 7 riders, but they came in on a wild card, and several of their riders are doing very well indeed. Some of the others really starting to feel the pace now.
Yes, and feeling the pace, and I think feeling the weather as well. The conditions have been, really difficult for them. The wet and the colder conditions, they would not like it at all. And I think for that reason they're suffering a bit more. As we can see our crash once again here as we go into the corner. It looked like there's the rider from Saxo Bank who got away very quickly. It looked like Petrov, who was also tangled up there.
So Yevgeny Petrov leaves his bike behind. Or is that maybe one of the Argos riders as well was in the middle of that? Phil at Phil Shea S says the way Omega Pharma Quickstep are riding, do you think they had a few quid on Cav at 14-1 for today's stage? Well, I'm sure that's entirely illegal, so I'd be quite certain that they haven't done that, but no, they've bigger fish to fry, and there are plenty of financial incentives for them to try and bring Mark Cavendish to the front. It's all about the glory. And
not about the bookmakers.
No.
Although the Belgians, of course,
you could still get 14-1, I'd get it on pretty quick.
Yes, and in Belgium racing, of course, there's a lot of the bookmakers that are at some of the events there, and it's certainly a thing that the supporters and the followers in Belgium, they are into their betting on bike racing.
turf accountants in Belgium, they're asphalt accountants. Just over 1 3/4 minutes to the group up front, as we survey the scene over Piedmont, working our way towards Cherasco and these vineyards of Langhe. This is the first time that Cherasco has played host to the Giro d'Italia. Well, it's a debut as a stage finish. It was a stage start actually in 2012. It's famous for the Baci di Cherasco, chocolates made from hazelnuts and dark chocolate. Of course, the stage start today, Busseto played host to a stage finish in 1964. Victory taken by the great Frenchman Jacques Anquetil. Omega Pharma Quick-Step and Orica Green Edge taking the responsibility for setting the pace as they close down on the 7 riders up front. At the back, as they have been for the last few days in the rain, the Colombian squad in this occasion, of course, they're making their way back after a crash. And that's safely achieved. Atapuma, as I said, their GC man, coming to grief, but safely back in the peloton without any difficulty, and in a solid 25th overall at the moment, and looking forward to the 2 Alpine stages to see can he move up the order.
We can see Steve Cummings there. He's been crowded out by the little Colombians.
Not able to handle himself in the group there. I find that hard to imagine. Steve Cummings pretty active at the front towards the conclusion of yesterday's stage. Sean, we saw Taylor Finney up there as well for BMC.
Yes, they were very active in the final, and you know, if they hadn't been as active, maybe opened the pace a bit, who knows, that break might just about have survived. They did up the pace a bit, but of course, you know, they were probably riding to keep Cat 11s out of danger, keep them on the front, and not surprising yesterday with the conditions, the wet corners, everybody was concerned about that.
One of the Omega Pharma Quick-Step riders going back to collect bottles for his squad, who were parked on the front. So a little bit of activity at the front. Was it riders struggling? One and a half minutes now, the advantage, so it's whittling down. Interesting to see that Nasser Bohani decided to pack the race today, one of 3 non-starters. And Sean, it's probably not that big a surprise that he stopped, but a little bit of a surprise that he stopped before this stage.
Yes, it is a surprise because it's possible for him to get to the finish today, although that final climb he was probably concerned about it. He doesn't like the climbs at all of the sprinters. He's probably, you know, the one who gets into more difficulty, but you know, you would you know, stay in there for another day and try and get through today's stage, because he has been getting close, you know, on a number of occasions, but you know, maybe the plan always was to just stop on that after that stage, and a bit surprising though.
The scene over Alba in Piedmont, and that's a very important city in the history of Italy. Briefly a kingdom territory of France at one stage, but now very, very much ensconced in the northwestern part of Italy. And perhaps most importantly in the history of cycling, the Ferrero company are based here, and Nutella was created by that company in this town in 1964, much to the delight of generations of children, and generations of children who grew up to be cyclists. So coming up to the second intermediate sprint of the day. Who's going to contest it? Andriato it was that took the points last time round. He's lurking towards the back of the group here. Will he be satisfied with having earned a few quid in that one, or will he try and get up there for it? Andriato, Nicola Bohem of Bardiani and Danilo Hondo took the points and the money last time round, so they hop over the little bit of road furniture there. It's hasn't been too much road furniture in these last few stages, but here's a couple of little niggly ones for the bunch to negotiate. It's nothing like as difficult as the Low Countries. And the group tapping through.
I'd love to be tapping like that, because they're tapping strongly. If we could ride like that in our in our little club runs, we will be going in really good shape. We're going real fast, because you know, the pace has been very, very strong. It's difficult to get a picture here when everybody is just contributing, you know, to 7 men, but they are moving along at a very nice rate. When you go back to the peloton, you can see that's where, you know, you get the real picture there. A lot of riders in the peloton on the rear end just hanging in there, and it lined out. So the pace has been hot the past hour and a half, 2 hours. It's going at a very fast rate, and of course earlier on it was, you know, an average of 42.5, but in the earlier part of the stage, when the break went away, the bunch, you know, was going at a slow rate for quite a long time. So, you know, it's much higher than that at the moment.
Yeah, so these guys are working hard to try and survive for as long as possible, and at the moment it looks like, well, looks likely they'll get to the bottom of the hill, but will they still be in front of the top of the hill? And what does that do to the dynamic of the race? Do Omega Pharma Quick Step throttle back a bit here and try and let that break hold out for a little bit longer? You would imagine that would be the that would make sense, but whether they do it is the next question.
Yes, it is a difficult situation, because with the top of the climb at 36 kilometers to the finish, you know, you cannot allow the breakaway to have too much of an advantage at that point, because they could go a long ways in the final, you know, with 7 riders. But again, if you take it the peloton too close, then there is a possibility of riders wanting to attack and go across on the climb itself, and that is, you know, for the better climbers, they can do that. So it's a complicated one, and as we can see, coming down to a minute at the moment, if they are still out in front on the climb, well, we could see some riders that's going in the attack and trying to just get across to the breakaway and make a bigger group.
So it's Andriato from Bohem for the in the second intermediate sprint of the day in Alba, and now that just shows you how close the bunch are behind, because they're also in Alba. Just 1.25 minutes behind. Omega Pharma Quick Step still drilling it and still causing all sorts of pain and agony for the likes of the Colombian riders at the back of the peloton. Andriato takes the points. The intermediate sprints competition at the moment, well, there was a change in the leadership of that competition, because Maxime Belkov was in the break yesterday, and now he's edged 1 point ahead of the Australian Cameron Worth of the Cannondale squad. Neither of those riders managing to make it into the break today, so they'll Belkov will hang on to the lead in that competition. Of course, there are points on offer as well for the points, the overall points competition, but Cavendish, Evans, Viviani et al. Not able to make a contribution there. Belkov's moved up to 4th overall in that in the points, but he's on 55 points. He's 28 points behind Mark Cavendish, so not really a factor there.
And 50 kilometers to go. We have done 204 kilometers, so only 50 to finish.
It's a long, long day in the saddle, and bearing in mind that they already have 12 days of racing in their legs before this. Well, it just shows you what great athletes they really are. 1 minute and 10 seconds the advantage for these 7 riders out front of the peloton. You're very welcome back to stage 13 of the Giro d'Italia of 2013 as we make our way to the foothills of the one classified climb of the day. There's 7 riders up front. but their advantage now has been whittled down to around about a minute with the combined ranks of Orica Green Edge and Amiga Pharma Quickstep doing savage work up front. And those 7 riders, 1 minute and 10 seconds their advantage. Pablo Lastras, Jaro Ermetti, Lars Bach, Danilo Hondo, Nicola Bohem, Rafael Andriato and Tobias Ludvigsen are desperately trying to hang out front, with Mark Cavendish safely ensconced behind those leading 7 or 8 riders. And the Maya Rosa group of Vincenzo Nibali are stalking these 7 riders. As I say, had a huge advantage at one stage, but well, it's just too worrying, I think, for Amiga Pharma Quickstep for them to let these guys get too far out front. Okay, let's hear from Astana's Giuseppe Martinelli.
Dispiace da una parte perché si perde un uomo importante per la.
Well, of course we are sad for him, speaking about Bradley Wiggins, because he's one of the most important riders of the Giro. But for me, until yesterday, he was the most dangerous of all, because he is a champion and he can be unpredictable. To me, this situation changes a lot, and I'm feeling more comfortable. For sure, it will be more easy for us, but at the end of the day, we need to be careful, because there are still a lot of climbs, and the weather is not good at all. I hope that Nibali will arrive safely to the end. The most dangerous riders now are Evans and Scarponi, and then we need to keep some attention to the other riders, because some of them can change the way of the race. So Giuseppe Martinelli paying tribute to Bradley Wiggins. And interestingly enough, doesn't include Rigoberto Urán amongst those riders that he's expecting to challenge his man, Vincenzo Nibali. And it's obvious, really, that he would have mentioned Cadel Evans, but picking out Michele Scarponi ahead of Rigoberto Urán, is that reasonable?
Well, I think they are certainly danger men. The positions are in the general classification, they're the nearest ones, but Urán is a one who he should, I think, keep an eye on. They will have to keep an eye on with the mountain stages, the mountain top finish we have to come, and it will be interesting to see. And then, as we mentioned earlier, I think the real good climbers, the Pozovivas, if they can hold in that 4 minutes, and they're really good in the mountain top finishes, the long climbs, they could also become a danger, because if they get away and take a minute and a half, 2 minutes on the first mountain top finish over the weekend, well then they becomes a danger man. And for Nibali, with some of the favourites, Bradley Wiggins, rather Hajjdal going out, it always makes the race a little bit easier to control, because if they were very much in there all the time, close in general classification, you have a lot of men to watch on the mountain top finishes, where now, he has a bit of breathing space. Cadel Evans, I suppose, and, Urán, Gesing, Scarponi, they are the ones which you have to watch. But the ones further down, he can allow them to take a minute and a half, but then they become danger ones as well. And with what we've got on the menu for next week, it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, very tough next week. Time trial is a mountain time trial, just under 20 kilometres in length, and that comes on Thursday, followed by 2 absolute stonking mountain stages on Friday and Saturday, and then the parade, you might call it, in Brescia on the Sunday. It'll all be done and dusted by then in terms of the overall, but well, those 3 stages coming so close to the end of the race, anything could happen. But the first big rendezvous, of course, happened this weekend in the Alps, and it's been uncertain weather, of course, in the last few days in the Alps. They've been clearing snow on the Galibier over the last few days, and plenty of snow has been falling. And the weather forecasts indicate that that's likely to continue, so uncertain weather in the Giro is not an unusual state of affairs in 2013. Lots of people want us to mention Jens Voigt's great victory in the Tour of California. He's such a popular figure in cycling. Sean mentioned it just before the last commercial break. Great stage win at the early age of 41. And don't forget, you can see Tour of California live on British Eurosport 1 at 22:15 this evening, with Rob Hatch and Brian Smith taking you through that stage. They're starting to toil up front. Pablo Lastras feeling the effects of a long day out, and they're on this climb up towards Trecune. Third category ascent, and around about 10 kilometers of a drag up to it. And it looked as if Amiga Pharma and Orica Greenedge had decided to just throttle back a little bit in the run up to the hill, so there might be an opportunity for these riders to go over the top and take the points, which would probably be good news for Perazzi, although Perazzi may want all the points he can get with some of the big GC contenders to take them later on. There's the roll call. Lastras, Hermetti of Androni, Lars Bach of the Lotto Belisol squad, Danilo Hondo of Radio Shack, Nicola Bohm of Bardiani Valvoli, Rafael Andriato of Vini Fantini, and Tobias Ludvigsson of the Argus Shimano squad. Lastras now 37 years of age, as I said earlier, a stage win in the Giro, and it's Nicola Bohem showing a little bit of ambition, and he's decided to strike out for glory. Bohem is 23 years of age. Won a stage of Giro Valle d'Aosta Mont Blanc in 2010. But Giro d'Italia is a much more different affair altogether, and that would have annoyed the rest of them.
Yes, and I think it's Pablo Lastras there and Lars Bohm chasing him down. Lastras, I think, wasn't happy with the attack there, and you could see that they were, just rolling up this line. They know that there's no chance of holding on and staying away for the mountain classification. It doesn't look that there's huge interest there because they just were coasting along. But when somebody goes in the attack, of course, well, then they say, well, we're not giving him away. There's 7 of us here. The 7s go back to the peloton, or we just chase him down, and that's what's happening at the moment. There's a bit of a battle on up there up front, but it'll be interesting to see in the main peloton, will the riders come out of the peloton, as we see Garzelli here start to push on, and with the advantage just under a minute, it's possible that riders will say, well, we'll go across to this, maybe pick up some of the breakaway riders that still are feeling good and go on from there.
Garzelli, the oldest man in the race, so the two 39-year-olds are very prominent at the moment, and they're just being watched by the peloton behind, which is Gruppo Compatto at the moment.
It's all the old men out front. Garzelli, Honda, of course, Lastras. They're all the guys who are showing
Yensi winning in California.
The good legs, and of course Jens winning in California.
Cycling, one of those sports that you can extend your career in if things go okay and you don't have too many crashes. And Garzelli gives a little flick. Will he get a little bit of help? So Garzelli has decided to strike out for glory. He's not a threat overall. Over 1.5 hours behind. So this is his opportunity for stage glory.
Is that Rosa? Yes.
Yeah, Diego Rosa, who we saw on the attack in recent stages from Androni Giocattoli, Venezuela. Of course, he's a man up front, so maybe he says, well, I'll just follow. But then so too does Garzelli. Yes. And they have got a gap at this stage. The peloton have let them go.
Yes, well, the peloton are going to continue on riding at the pace. We can see Omega Pharma Quickstep just having a look at Garzelli when he goes in the attack and continue on at the pace. And they will try and do that. They'll just try and, can things with the peloton, keep quite a strong pace, because that's what they need. If a lot of riders start attacking, well, then it will, scatter the peloton all over the place, and they will have, major difficulty controlling. It'll be interesting to see will there be somebody else come out of the peloton, because this is a long climb. As you said, you could say it's 10 kilometres, but really I suppose it's about 6-7 kilometres of climbing. The earlier part was quite an easy run in, but still it's something that you have to be careful here. We could see more riders coming across, and that's going to be
one
the
of them. Yeah, Stefano Perazzi is one of them. A couple of riders from Katusha. Is it Paolini? And another rider from Vini Fantini in there as well. No surprise to see Perazzi. Of course, if there's any chance, a sniff of points on offer, then it looks like the hammer's gone down in the peloton as well. It's going to be difficult for riders to get out of there, especially if they're general classification contenders. I haven't seen any of those so far. But plenty of activity, and these riders, Lastras, etc., will be made aware. So 3 riders up front. Nicola Bohem kicked it off, and Pablo Lastras and Lars Bach have called him to account. So these 3 riders are pushing ahead. Ermetti trying to get across from Androni Giocattoli. And this is the chasing group of riders. At the back you see Stefano Perazzi in the Mountains Classification Leaders jersey.
And this is going to be the difficult one for the sprinters, because at this point, it's starting quite early on the climb. The Garzelli, of course, starting it off, and then other riders trying to get out of the group here, make it across to Garzelli. And we can see in the front of the bunch as well, there's some riders pushing on the pace quite high, and it could be a bit of a difficult one for the climbers just to hang on in here. If it keeps on going at this rate and there's some more attacks on the front of the peloton, well then that will be where the sprinters have major difficulty holding on in main peloton.
Well, Lastras and Bach have left it up to Bohem to do the work. He was the one that showed the ambition. And Lastras spinning a much smaller gear, saving his legs as best he can. Bohem grinding away towards the bottom of the block in the small ring. And meanwhile, the chasing group is attempting to find a way across, and they're popping riders out of the peloton. The pace is on. Riders from BMC towards the back, starting to feel the effects. Colombian riders as well, who find themselves a little bit further back than they would like. And Lastras and Bach content to let Bohem set this strong pace, and Bohem is putting it up to them, and he's holding the gap at 1 minute to the Maya Rosa riders behind. So it's all starting to kick off on this hill. Join us after this short break to see how they get on.